up guys, I'm Amanda, the Botanical Brunette, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about how to introduce a new plant into your home. So many of you, like myself, are going out to nurseries and plant shops now because the weather is getting nicer and we want to add some new plants into our homes. So there's a few things that you want to do when you bring home that new plant. There's a few steps that you need to take to make sure that the rest of your plants in your collection and your home don't get infested with pests, or really just to make sure that that plant survives in your home as best as it can. So today I'm going to go over some 5 do's and don'ts of basically what I do and what you should be doing when you bring home a new plant before you really introduce it into the rest of your plant collection. Now, you don't have to have a plant collection. This is also really good just to know generally, just really when you bring home a new plant, what do I do? What are the steps I take? Because sometimes people think like, oh, bring home a new plant and just kind of place it and it's good to go. But a lot of times there's pests, there may be underlying issues in the soil, and really there's other things that people are just a little confused about when you bring home a new plant. So hopefully this video will help clarify any of those questions. And again, as always in my plant care videos, if you have any questions, go ahead and please leave a comment below and I will be happy to answer them. So I got this Homelanema Emerald Gem from Lowe's a couple of days ago and I've tried to do nothing to it. Guys, it has like killed me to not do anything with it. Now, I did do one thing to it and I'll get to that in a minute, but I kind of had to. But other than that, I have not done a thing to this plant. I got this plant a couple of days ago and it is currently in quarantine. It's kind of just living its life in quarantine, but like I had to get it. This came in this really cool funky planter. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like Live Trends. I think that's like the brand at like Lowe's and Home Depot. They have like really cool funky plants. I actually wind up gravitating toward that just because they already come in pots and they're just like really cool fun plants. You can also get a lot of cool combinations with them too. So I was ready to pick this plant up. I had really never seen this plant before in my life and I fell in love with the lush green foliage of this plant. It is just so beautiful. It's so pretty. So the first thing that I want to talk about when you bring home a new plant, whether you bring it home from a plant shop or you get it in the mail, is don't repot it immediately. Now I know you want to go in there, you want to dig your little fingers into the soil and see how the roots are doing. I would suggest if you get a new plant to make sure that the roots look okay. 9 out of 10 times, at least for me, at like Lowe's and Home Depot, it comes right out of the pot. A lot of times the plants are actually pretty root bound, so it almost comes out immediately like perfectly fine. That was the case for this plant. I was actually able to just lift the plant right out of the pot and I was able to see the roots and make sure that they were okay. Now I know that's not always the case when you get a plant in the mail. Sometimes even plants in the mail will come bare root. So basically what you want to do is check on the roots and just make sure that the roots are okay. After that, put the plant back in. Don't really disturb the root ball too much. You don't want to get digging in there, but a lot of the times the outside roots will kind of tell you what the inside roots are going to look like. So that is completely fine. You don't have to like go and dig out the root ball. It's actually best to just not disturb it at all for at least a week. I would give it the plant a week before you go dive into repotting. Now, there are certain situations where you may want to repot your plant immediately. Like I was saying with the bare root plants, you sometimes want to go ahead and repot that plant. My suggestion would be to get a glass jar or something like that, put a little bit of Super Thrive in it, and let the plant acclimate in some water versus soil. You don't know what that plant was grown in. Sometimes it was grown in moss, sometimes it's growing in water, but 9 out of 10 times water is going to be completely fine and it will help rehydrate your plant as well. Especially if you have plants that you got imported from like another country. That is an experience that I have recently dealt with my plants from Indonesia, that I basically just kind of put them in water with Super Thrive and they are doing amazingly. That's something that you can do if you get a plant in the mail and it comes bare root. Don't repot it immediately. Like I said, give it that week and then go ahead and repot it. For this plant, I did wind up repotting it. I don't know if this is a common problem with Lowe's and Home Depot or maybe just the one by me, but every time I get a plant from them, it is sopping wet, like soaked. I wanted to make sure that the plant wasn't going to root rot, so I made sure that I gently took the plant out of the pot, which the plant was root bound, and it had beautiful juicy white roots. Had a little bit of algae that was growing on it. I did wind up spraying it down with diluted hydrogen peroxide just to make sure that there was nothing kind of funky growing in there. And then I wound up putting damp but not wet soil on the bottom. Anytime you open a bag of soil, it usually has some level of dampness. So that is perfectly fine. You can also take like a mister and kind of mist the bottom of the soil just to make sure that you're not placing that plant directly on dry soil. That might be an issue with like a moisture imbalance and could make the plant unhappy. So you just want to kind of gently just like spray down any of that soil just to get the topsoil of where you're going to place that plant. You want to make sure that it's not completely bone dry. So basically what I did for this plant too is I did squeeze it out, and I'm telling you, I got like 2 cups of water. I just gently squeezed it out. I didn't want to like completely squeeze all the roots. Again, I don't want to mess with the root ball too much. Just make sure that you give it at least a week to kind of acclimate before you kind of dig in there. Another common mistake that people make when they get a plant is they jump right into plant care. You have researched your plant. I did not add that as a tip because you know me. I am a huge advocate of that. If you guys don't know me, make sure you research your plant. I'm not gonna make like a whole topic on that, but when you buy a plant, research it. When I bought this plant, I had no idea. I've never had this species of plant in my collection. I've actually, to be honest, never heard of this plant. I was like, I gotta get this, I gotta like figure out how to take care of this. I actually thought this was an Allegonema, and I was like, oh, those are gonna be really easy to care for. Long and behold, I did find out that this plant is actually very similar to Allegonemas. I was like, I need to make sure that I know lighting, watering, and all that. Again, I'm not gonna go super into that because you guys should already know that. What I mean by diving into plant care is, say you get a plant that requires full sun and loves water. So you're gonna wanna, okay, let me give it some water and let me throw it right in the sunlight. So if you have a plant that is a full sun plant, you wanna make sure that you give it a good amount of sun, maybe some bright indirect sunlight, and kind of acclimate it to a full sun plant. I wouldn't immediately throw it in the sunlight because you don't know where that plant was grown. You don't know if that plant is used to the full sun. If it isn't, it's gonna need some time to kind of adjust to that sunlight. A couple years ago, I bought a bird of paradise and I researched like full sun plants because I wanted something for my backyard, and I got a full sun plant. I got a bird of paradise and I threw it outside and it hated it. The leaves curled in so tight. I was out there watering it like every day and I'm like, this doesn't seem right. It just absolutely was not okay. Currently, it's actually outside in my front door, which gets a good amount of sun, but not full sun all day. I think eventually I'll be able to kind of pull it out here, but it wasn't a full sun plant when I got it, even though it says it's a full sun plant. Best bet for a new plant is to put it in an area that has medium bright light. Really, that's my when in doubt. When in doubt, you have a plant, medium, bright, indirect light. So you wanna make sure, like with any plant, that you're watering it when it needs it. So getting a moisture meter or learning how to do the finger test is going to be beneficial to you when you get a new plant. So for me, I obviously did not need to water this plant. I wound up actually watering it like after. So for this plant, I actually wound up watering it after a couple of days. So because it was in that drier soil, I think that drier soil kind of helped absorb that moisture. And I did find out that these plants actually do enjoy a little bit more moist soil versus a drier soil. So I actually did wind up giving this a full watering yesterday, I think it was. So this plant got a good amount of water with Super Thrive. Super Thrive is the best thing to have when you have new plants. This has saved so many acclimations, so many plants that are in shock. It will basically help with transplant shock. So if you have, let's say you got a plant and a week later, you're like, all right, it's time to repot it. I want to put it in a cute pot. After you repot that plant, you can actually put a little bit of Super Thrive in that water and it will help it so it doesn't go into shock. If you had a plant go into shock, it is just not fun. It constantly gives you yellow leaves. It like basically kind of falls apart before your eyes. So you want to make sure that you don't put your plant in shock. That actually does help a lot. That is, I've never had a plant go in shock with Super Thrive. Any new plant that I have in my collection, propagation or not, goes in a Super Thrive mix. I would also suggest to stay away from fertilizing for at least a month. That may seem like a long time. I usually wait a month. You can probably do it after you repot, but it kind of also depends on the time of year and everything like that. So there's many factors that go into fertilizing. I would just kind of stick with after a month, you do your watering and you do your fertilizing at the same time. So when you bring a new plant home, one of the best things that I can say to do to make it feel brand new is to clean it up. So sometimes you'll get a plant that has maybe a yellow leaf here and there. You want to make sure that you clean up the plant. Now I'm talking wiping down the leaves, getting rid of yellow leaves, and also getting rid of any kind of like dead, decaying matter on the topsoil. That will also help deter pests away. Pests love that decaying matter. So that will also help with the pests. I did leave a couple of leaves on here for you guys to see kind of what I mean by like cleaning up the plant. So I have a couple leaves on here that I kept. So I have this little yellow leaf that has been driving me absolutely crazy. So that is gonna go today. And then we may have pests on this plant because this new leaf right here has a bit of markings on it. Looks like kind of like chew marks. I'll bring that closer so you guys can see. So that leaf is, it's not picking up, but there we go. You guys can see like the little chew marks. That is an indication that there is probably some kind of pest on here and we need to kind of figure out what it is and where it is. Any leaves that you see like pest markings or yellowing or anything like that, cut them off. So that's what I'm gonna do today. I left them on there for you guys so you guys can see what I mean, but I'm going to just basically use some clean shears and just cut off those leaves. It's kind of sad because this is like a newer leaf. So that poor little leaf didn't even have a chance. And then I have a leaf down here that has a little bit of like something going on with like pests maybe. And then we got this one. Now you also want to make sure that you're not going to cut off a leaf that may potentially have a new leaf growing in the stem. So here's a little bit of a better look at that. So that's kind of an indication that there might be some pests. You can kind of see it on the front too. And then this leaf probably didn't. It probably just got damaged, but it was driving me crazy. And then I cut this leaf off, which had a little bit of yellowing. We also have inside this plant, we have some like dead decaying matter. So we want to kind of go ahead and just remove that. So just kind of removing any of like these like dead leaf stems or anything like that. A lot of the times they just basically come right off and you don't need to cut them. Turn the plant around. Like all of these little things. This really does make it feel like a new plant. This one probably won't come off easily. we go. Got it. And then I got one more right in here. This is like my favorite thing to do with like philodendrons, because they have those like all the little sheaths that like are stuck on the stems. So fun to remove. Like it's such a like calming, like peaceful thing just to pull them off. I actually thoroughly checked this plant before I brought it home and I didn't see any pests. Again, it has been quarantined, so I'm not really sure what is going on with this plant, but we'll get down to the root of it soon and we'll be able to kind of treat it, but that is coming up. So the next thing you want to do when you want to clean up your plant is to just make sure that the leaves are completely cleaned off. So what I like to do is I will take a little bit of neem oil. So I use this neem oil extract and mix it with water. I do about 1 part neem oil and 3 parts water. That's what I kind of did. I mixed it in a little like Bumble and Bumble sprayer. But I have this and I basically just will mist the whole plant and then just wipe it down. So that's what I'm gonna be doing. Because if you guys can see, a lot of the times when you get plants from nurseries or anything like that, they're gonna have like hard water stains. I didn't notice that with this, but they are kind of dusty and they do need to be kind of cleaned off. Again, drove me crazy for the last couple of days, but I do it for you guys. So I have this fun little glove that I like to wear, and I'm going to just spray the whole plant and then wipe down the leaves. Now neem oil is really good for a like shine, but it's not super, like it does help with pests, but it's not going to kill most of them. So if you have a plant that has pests on it, which this might, it's not gonna kill it, but it definitely helps like deter them away. And while you do this, this is also a good way, really anytime you do this with any of your plants, new or old, it's a good way to see if there is anything on your leaves. So you'll be able to kind of like go in and check and just make sure that all the leaves are completely cleaned off and happy and healthy. I can't tell you how many times I've gone through and wiped off these leaves, not this plant in particular, but like say my Monstera, and that's when I found thrips on it. It was devastating. And if you don't know, thrips are the hardest pests to get rid of. They are awful. I mean, a lot of people just, I think so many people in the plant community have just given up, and they're just like, if you have thrips, you're gonna have them forever. Like, that's just kind of what it is. They implant their eggs in the leaves and they're just nasty little buggers. So you wanna make sure that you wipe these down and just check. Just to check to see if there are any pests on it. But really, I mean, wiping down these leaves is going to get rid of any of the dust, any of the debris, and it will also help with the plant so it doesn't suffocate, and it will help absorb as much light as it can. Especially if you are needing to put this plant in a lower light area or something like that, it will help it tremendously. So, the whole plant is wiped down. I feel better. I feel better. It's nice and clean. I'll show you all of these glossy leaves. So pretty. Like, oh, like I love it. It didn't gloss them up as much as some plants that I've gotten in the past, but they're definitely like, they're definitely glossy. Ooh, so pretty. This plant is so fun. I love this plant. Like, so pretty. So the next thing that you're gonna wanna do when you bring home a new plant, after you've wiped down the leaves, you check the roots, you've checked everything, and everything is looking good, you still wanna go in and treat for pests. I'm gonna say that even if you don't find anything, if the plant looks completely fine, or you've bought the plant from that plant shop 100 different times, or what have you, treat that plant. Just do yourself a favor and treat it. So there's two things that I do when I treat a plant that I bring home for the first time. So the first thing that I do is in the morning or evening is I will go in with my, you can see that I've read the instructions 1,000 times, this insect killing soap and this Captain Jack's Dead Bug Brew. These two combined are my dead bug powerhouse. I mix both of them together, do it as they do on the instructions, and I put it in this like recycled like method bottle, and I spray the hell out of my plants. I make sure that every inch in surface is covered, even the topsoil. I'll spray it, I don't care. I'll spray this whole plant, back, front, inside. I spray down into the unfurling leaves. I make sure that that plant is completely saturated. Dripping. You want it sopping wet. Get every single surface because those pests hide everywhere. Now, Captain Jack's doesn't kill everything. If you do have a certain type of pest, that you research that pest and see what kills that pest. Captain Jack's does kill the majority of houseplants, but not all of them. Another thing that I do to kind of help prevent pests in the future is I'll go ahead and spray this whole plant down, and then when I water, I will use some systemic granules. Now, I know there's been some controversy with systemic granules about how bad it is for the environment. Just be careful, don't use this in your garden, but you can use it on your houseplants. It's completely fine. So what you want to do is you want to take the systemic granules and just sprinkle them through the top. Now, I had just watered this plant, but I did not add any systemic. So I'm going to just go ahead and add some systemic to this plant. So I'll kind of like try to lift it up. We'll go over here. I'll do this after. So I'm gonna sprinkle the systemic on the plant and then I'll show you after. So this is basically what it looks like. So you're gonna have a good amount of systemic. You can mix that into the soil. I'll probably take a stick or a wooden dowel or something like that and just kind of stab it into the soil. That way, come next watering, I can water that into the plant. But because the soil is wet, it might be able to start working. I'm not really sure. It's not that wet, so it probably won't, but it's worth a try, right? Basically what systemic does is I like to call it like a flea treatment for your plants. So basically when you give your pet a flea treatment, it gets into the pet's system somehow, I don't know it exactly, but it gets into the pet system where the flea will bite it and die from poison. Same thing with the plants. If the pests bite the leaves and the plant has been treated with systemic, it will die, even thrips. So if this plant has thrips or anything like that, it will take care of it. I think there is one pest, I'm not 100% sure, I'll put it here. I think it's spider mites, but I'm not 100% sure. So after you've treated your plant, you've checked it, you've wiped the leaves down, now it's time to quarantine it. This is something that I should practice what I preach. Basically, I don't quarantine my plants. And that's what caused the thrip outbreak. So learn from my mistakes and quarantine your plants. You want to have a designated area in your home to quarantine your plants. Now remember, pests fly. So you want to make sure that you put your plants far enough away or even into another room. You can also take a plant, depending on how big it is. For this plant, it would definitely be too big, but you can get one of those like Tupperware containers or even a Ziploc bag and put it over the plant. Any really transparent, like sealable bag will be able to go over that plant, still be able to get sun, and it also will help raise the humidity, which could help acclimate the plant. So kind of a win-win. You want to make sure that you just keep this away from your plant collection for at least 3 to 4 weeks. You want to make sure in the 3 to 4 weeks that you keep checking back on it, making sure it's doing okay, there's no pests, there's nothing kind of flying around, there's no like dying leaves or anything like that. You want to make sure that that's okay. If you do see something, you'll want to treat it again and then quarantine it again for another 3 to 4 weeks and just repeat that process until you see nothing. If you treat your plants and you quarantine it and you don't see anything for 3 to 4 weeks, you are welcome to add that into your collection, add it into your with your plants or whatever, and it should be fine. I don't want to say it's completely fine because I have done that. I've done the full month quarantine, put that plant out, and then it had mealybugs. And I'm like, where the heck did this come from? But again, I don't always quarantine my plants. So one of my plants could have had mealybugs and transferred it to the plant that was completely fine and did the whole process. Trust me, within a few days, you'll have pests on that plant if another plant has those pests. So you just make sure that you check your plants, you quarantine your plants, and you treat your plants. I mean, this plant actually is going to be in quarantine and actually kind of living on my dining room table. It is not really near any other plants that are that special to me. So it's not going to affect really any of my plants, and that's kind of a good space. But make sure that you have like a designated area that's several feet away that you can quarantine your plants. So that's it. So that is what you do when you have a new plant. Basically the steps that you take when you get a new plant, and it may seem daunting. You may be like, oh, I'll just put it in my plant collection and just let it ride. You can, but there's going to be a chance that you may run into pests or any kind of issues like that. So just making sure that you treat and quarantine your plants is really key when you are getting a new plant. Also making sure that you're not going to be overwatering or underwatering your plant, or really just throwing it in a sunny spot just because the internet said that it likes sun. I am excited for you all to get new plants. I really hope that you're watching this video because you got a new plant, and if you did, congratulations. I'm happy for you. Let me know if you guys have any questions in the comments. I will be happy to answer them. But that's it for today. So I hope you guys all have a great day and stay botanical.